The honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Last week, the government's own data revealed that oil and gas is the only sector of the economy showing signs of life. And on Monday, the NDP Liberals announced a job-killing cap on oil and gas production. The government's own analysis admits that their cap on production will cost thousands of jobs and billions of dollars, destroying Canadian paychecks. No wonder Canadian-based Enbridge is building a $700 million pipeline in the United States. Wow. This Prime Minister is creating powerful paychecks for American energy workers and American steel workers, while Canadian workers can't afford their food or rent. Why is this Prime Minister driving investment jobs away from Canada towards the United States?
The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
Mr. Speaker, what the member is saying is simply false. It's a cap on pollution. Pollution is a bad thing, something the Conservative Party of Canada should understand. You want to talk about investment? Let's talk about a $2 billion investment that Strathcona, an oil company in Alberta, is making in Canada to make sure that workers in Alberta and the energy sector can have a future in a carbon-constrained world, something the Conservative Party of Canada is incapable of understanding, Mr. Speaker.
Colleagues, especially when the Speaker stands up and the House is quieted, that's not the time to interfere. I'll ask the honourable member as well from Edmonton Manning, please, to allow the responses to be given until the honourable member is recognised. The honourable member from Battle River Crowfoot.
Mr. Speaker, that minister may not understand how the energy industry works, but Canadians do. Regardless of the name, this cap is going to drive investment out of Canada, costing Canadians their jobs. It's been 9 long years of a Liberal government bent on destroying the Canadian energy sector, despite the industry being the biggest driver of the Canadian economy and employing hundreds of thousands of Canadian workers. So I'll ask the question again. Why is that extremist minister and that Prime Minister helping Donald Trump create American jobs?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Foreign direct investment, Mr. Speaker, is up in Canada. Investors are coming to Canada because we provide stability. We provide opportunity. Mr. Speaker, Canada has a long-standing history of standing up and protecting Canadian workers. And when it comes to the last NAFTA negotiations, it was the Conservative Party of Canada that asked us to back down. Well, we didn't, Mr. Speaker. We stood up for steel workers. We stood up for our auto workers. We stood up for our agricultural workers and our farmers, Mr. Speaker, and we'll do it again.
The honourable member from Cypress Hills, the honourable member for Cypress Hills Grasslands.
Speaker, after 9 years, the NDP Liberals are not worth the cost as they continue to crush the Canadian energy sector. This week, they announced their job-killing oil and gas production cap. Enbridge, a company based in Calgary, is taking their $700 million investment out of Canada to build a pipeline in America. That's jobs and powerful paychecks for American pipeliners, for American engineers, and for American truckers. Why is the Prime Minister so focused on creating powerful paychecks for Americans and not for Canadians?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Salt experts that disagree with them, but recently their go-to guy, Sylvain Charlebois, said climate change is the agri-food sector's greatest challenge and agreed that climate change is a major driver of food price inflation. So if Conservatives actually cared about elevated food prices, they'd have a plan to address climate change, but they don't. They've got nothing. No plan to address the biggest challenge in the agri-food sector, no plan to address the biggest driver of food price inflation. Now, are they going to start attacking this expert too?
Yeah.
The honourable member for Cypress Hills Grasslands.
Mr. Speaker, it's time for the Liberals to get back to the real world where Canadians are struggling to eat, heat, and house themselves. While the minister tries to claim that the production cap is going to create thousands of jobs, his own department is saying that's going to cost the Canadian economy billions of dollars and that we're going to lose thousands of jobs. The Canadian oil and gas industry already provides powerful paychecks for our people. So why is the Prime Minister so hell-bent on destroying those powerful paychecks and giving them to Americans?
The honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance.
We love powerful paychecks, Mr. Speaker. Actually, wages have outpaced inflation in Canada for the last 20 months, Mr. Speaker. The member opposite wants to talk about the United States. Well, I've got some information for him. Last week, the economist David Rosenberg said U.S.-based investors should strongly consider moving from New York to Toronto, Mr. Speaker. Now, I am not a Leafs fan, Mr. Speaker, but I happen to agree with that economist, and I know that investors right around the world are looking to Canada.
The honourable member from Edmonton, Wetaskiwin.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years, the NDP Liberal government is not worth the cost. The government's own analysis admits that their cap on production will cost Canadians thousands of jobs and billions of dollars. Meanwhile, we have a Canadian company who can't get a pipeline approved in Canada, investing $700 million in a U.S. project. And get this, in 2023, they increased oil and gas imports to Canada with over 40 million barrels shipped across the Atlantic from Nigeria and Saudi Arabia alone. Why is this Prime Minister so intent on funding powerful paychecks in the U.S. and everywhere else while Canadians struggle to afford food and housing?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Innovation.
Speaker, I know Conservatives like to cherry-pick per capita measures that try and talk down the Canadian economy. But in fact, if you look at per capita foreign direct investment, Canada is #1 in the world, ahead of Brazil, ahead of the United States. If you look at the IMF's projections of growth in Canada, our GDP is projected to grow more in the year 2025 than any other G7 country. We will not apologize on this side of the House for being optimistic about Canada's future.
The honourable member for Coast of Bay, Central, Notre Dame.
After 9 years, the NDP Liberals are not worth the cost, especially for Newfoundland and Labrador's offshore oil and gas industry, where for the second year in a row, there were no bids for new exploration licenses. Energy NL says it was not unexpected, pointing to a complex, inconsistent, and burdensome regulatory system, including the only emissions cap in the world. So, Mr. Speaker, will these economic assassins get rid of that stupid cap so that we can export Canadian oil and gas instead of jobs?
I'd like to encourage members to be judicious in their use of language. The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
50%, Mr. Speaker, 50% higher. Now, what is that, Mr. Speaker? It's the imports of foreign oil into Canada when the Conservatives were in government than we are, Mr. Speaker. When it comes to standing up for our industries, whether it's the energy sector, whether it's steel workers, whether it's agricultural workers, Mr. Speaker, there is one party in this House that does that consistently. It is the Liberal Party of Canada. The Conservatives say, give it all away, and we will not do that. We will always stand up for Canadians, our workers, and our economy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.